Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, dear friends, dear students, good afternoon, everybody. I am Andris Sprūds. I am director of Latvian Institute of International Affairs, and I happen to be also a professor at Riga Stradiņš University. And of course, I have a great pleasure, great delight today to welcome all of you at a book presentation and related discussion as well on Latvian-US cooperation, relationship and cooperation. And presenting the book, it is always a very pleasant event. It's like presenting your intellectual offspring intellectual child to the public for a debate as well. So it is a partly celebration. We have been building bridges, we Latvians, we in the Baltic Sea region, especially the Baltic countries and Latvians especially, we have been building bridges with the United States for a long time. And we have achieved some strategic partnership, what many of us value very highly. It has been underlined also by strong support and presence of the United States in the Baltic states and also here in Latvia. But nothing must be taken for granted. Building bridges take place in a changing landscape. Globally, we are repivoting to Asia. Asia is attracting more and more of attention. Regionally, we've seen game changers, Russia's adventurism in Ukraine, and of course also serious regional explosion with migration and terrorism challenges, what we experience. Last but not least, domestically, we see some politics of insecurity and resentment on both sides of Atlantic Ocean. And many of us wonder what would be the presidency of Mr. Donald Trump one day, and it's still open question. As some would say, we are 1 or 2 elections away from the end of the West as we know it. So quite a dramatic assessments of the current situation. So the developments of the recent years and also months place this book, what we are opening today, into a different light and a different context. We speak about achievements, we speak about opportunities, but we don't forget about regional and bilateral challenges, some minor disappointments, some unachieved outcomes, and some tests of the future. So today's event is not only the book presentation, but above all, it intends both to reflect and to recommend as well, to assess where are we at the moment. But of course, I must also add that this book and this event would be impossible without great partnerships. First of all, the partnerships with intellectual contributors, namely authors, on both sides of the ocean again, so the Latvian authors and also the American representatives and authors. So we have a diversity of views on security, on economic developments, on people-to-people relationship, on historical developments as well. We should put everything a little bit into the context, not just in the regional, but also in historic one. And we certainly highly appreciate generous support by our institutional and business partners, the support and encouragement. I would immediately underline the Latvijas Dzelzceļš. Latvijas Dzelzceļš has been, the company has been very instrumental in supporting us and letting us to complete the project and to have a productive and successful result. We have also other business entities, so it shows that there is a spectrum of companies interested in perhaps also the intensifying economic interaction with the counterparts in the United States, such as in Latvia, such as companies as PATA and also European Crabbing Association supported us. But we should also add that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has been behind the project for some time, and Latvian embassy in the United States, I think Andrejs Pildegovičs has been the in a sense, godfather of the previous projects, but Andris Razāns also was a supporter and an encourager and motivator for this project, so we highly appreciate also personally the involvement by two ambassadors. And we must also add that our agent of influence, the American Latvian Association, has been on a board and also has been willing to be part of this project. So we absolutely are very thankful to the supporters, but I should always underline that responsibility for the book is, of course, Institute. All mistakes, it's ours, and partly authors as well. So they should take, of course, sort of some responsibility for their thoughts. But I think it's a good thing published in the book. So I am ending here with my introductory remarks. We have a very dynamic event today. So the opening remarks and then two short dynamic panels on security and on economic cooperation. And we will start with the opening remarks. And I'm very happy and delighted and honored to give the floor to former President of Latvia, Valdis Zatlers. Mr. Zatlers, Mr. President, the floor is yours, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm very grateful to the Andris Sprūds because I had the privilege to read the book a few days before this very special event. And now today I'm playing the role of the first reader, or maybe one of the first readers. So my first conclusion would be pretty short. That's a good book. And I'll tell you why. When I started with the first chapters, I really was delighted with the very detailed description of US-Latvian relationship during the last 100 years. A lot of very specific details were described in this first chapter. So, and it showed why this foreign policy of the United States have been successful. Because making the balance between the ideal politics, which is mentioned in the book, and the real politics is also mentioned in the book, and keep this balance for 100 years is a pretty difficult task. And the message why it was successful is very clear. Because the US relationship with Baltics and with Latvia especially was based on ideology. And this ideology was followed by very strict principles, and these principles were never compromised during these 100 years. So, and it's interesting that I found out to myself that the ideal politics side was the Latvian side, US-Latvian relationship, but on the real politics, not the ideal, but the real politics side was the Russia. So, it was relevant nearly 100 years ago, and it's relevant also today. But basically, this message is very clear. Never give up your ideology. Never give up your basic principles in your foreign affairs. If you want to succeed in this world, well, you need to balance the powers and of course, the influences. After the first two chapters, I was a little bit upset because there was a lot of written about the US, how the US policymakers were trying to design the policy towards the Baltics and Latvia. And not too much today was said how the Latvian side was active in this process. But because of definite reasons, it is inevitable that this is, really it was in a such way. But few chapters later, all my disappointment disappeared. And especially liked the chapter by Gunda Reire. But this is very interesting, and please all pay attention to that. She quoted the Russia's foreign affairs documents to argue why we should act in a one or another way, and why should the Latvian foreign policy should be as it is today, and why the US-Latvian relation should be as it is today. So we cannot stop any time in our development. And I like the ending up this book with some ideas how to make the bridges, and how to make the future, and what will be the very substantial elements in building sustainable US-Latvian relationship in the future to come. So I'll end up very shortly, Thank you very much for all the authors. I congratulate you. Thank you very much for all the contributors. You have done a very brilliant job. And I wish you good luck to the Latvian Institute of International Affairs, because I like the title, Revisiting a Strategic Partnership. Please go on and revisit it time for time. I'm looking for the next book. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. President, for your encouragement. And we are very delighted to have such a first reader. And I hope that it will not be the last time when you are the first reader of the books, that you will continue with reading our books and as one of the first ones. Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. And with this, I have the pleasure to give the floor to State Secretary, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Andris Sprūds, who has been a long-standing ambassador in the United States and a godfather of some of these publications as well. Andrejs, please, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much. Paldies, Andri. Mr. President, ambassadors, members of parliament, dear colleagues, historians, practitioners in foreign affairs, it is indeed an absolute delight to be present at this arrival of the new publication on the Latvian-US relations. As a former student of history and as a practitioner in diplomacy, of course, I think this book will be a very valuable addition to the previous publications arranged by senior members of our Foreign Service, Alfreds Bielmanis, Anatols Dinbergs, and particularly those who have contributed to relations during the last 25 years. Indeed, the previous such publication arrived shortly before Chicago NATO summit, where we, with President Zatlers, together we were preparing the alliance for the new century, for the new dimension. And of course, as much as in the previous publication, security is a theme. And I think the timing of this book is very appropriate, since this is exactly the time when we are debating decisions for the Warsaw Summit. And I fully agree with Andris that this is the time when we follow with great interest and some concern the events in the United States and elections. And this is the time when new members of Congress will be elected, the new president will be elected, vice president, etc. So I think this document, this publication will help us very much to explain to the people in Washington and across the United States where we are, what is our vision, and how we would like to amend and forge this strategic partnership. And I'm sure when it comes to the Warsaw Summit, I'm sure that the decisions will contribute greatly to the strengthening of the alliance here, and the presence of NATO troops in the Baltics will be reinforced, and the United States will play an important role in these decisions. I think since regaining of independence and since signing of the US-Baltic Charter, we've been dreaming for the three pillars in our relations, and security has been always a priority. But equally, we were dreaming about people-to-people contacts. And I remember one of my luckiest moments in my professional life has been the elimination of the visa requirements for the Balts, for Latvians traveling to the United States. It's hard to believe that already 8 years have passed. Since 2008, we have this privilege, and I think this is remarkable how much we have used to this. But since then, educational contacts have been strengthened. US Baltic Freedom Fund has been very operational. And I think this flow of intellectual cross-fertilization has been reinforced every day, and this is very crucial. But the last third pillar of the relationship has been relatively less strong, and I refer to the economic interaction. We always had been dreaming for more economic, financial investments, partnerships, but for objective and subjective reasons that has been less easy achieved goal. And I think since the last publication in 2008, quite many things have changed. Since that time, over the last 3-4 years, we have seen this remarkable joint effort for supplies to Afghanistan, Northern Distribution Network. We have seen first US investments in our banking sector. We have witnessed more and more interaction in terms of trade. And I think signing and joining of OECD by Latvia in 2 weeks' time on the 2nd of June in Paris will be another layer of security and another example of close interaction between our countries when we will partner more and more with an economic frame. We have not been able to achieve TTIP by this year. Probably it will not happen during the current administration, but it remains as a goal. And we very much hope that this agreement will expand our trade with the United States. It will be another layer of integration. And of course, on the government to-do list of priorities, we hope that Latvian Investment Agency will restore its representation in the United States. And I'm very happy that for this book we have many more business players interested in doing business with the United States, exporting to the United States. And again, mentioning this Northern Distribution Network, I want to thank Latvian Railway for very excellent partnership in that respect. I wouldn't talk too much. I was told that I have only 2 minutes. So my profound appreciation to all authors, to all contributors. And I haven't read the book yet, I have to confess, but I'm sure it will help us, and I will bring it to Washington on my forthcoming trip in my luggage. So thank you so much for this very timely present. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrejs, for excellent already the overview of the issues, what we have been dealing with and what we are still facing, what we have to still achieve in many ways. But please read before you bring it to the Washington, so not to have any diplomatic misunderstanding, because still there are intellectuals with their own opinions within this book. But anyway, thank you so much, and thank you for your support. I think we had really good strategic partnership also with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on many issues, keeping our own minds open in many ways, but still also interacting closely. And I think this has been a good example of a good strategic partnership. But with this, I also can express my words of appreciation mentioned by Andrejs Pildegovičs in similar way to Latvijas Dzelzceļš, Latvian Railways, but also the companies, business entities are willing more and more contribute. We are always looking for some partners outside, but there is a potential here within Latvia itself, and I think it's a very good example of it, a good example how the business can cooperate with think tanks and also with the diplomats in many ways. So Edvīns Bērziņš, who is chairman of Latvian Railway System, please, your floor is yours.
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's really honored on behalf of Latvian Railway to open the presentation of this new publication, which is co-sponsored by Latvian Railway. Transport infrastructure is the most important dimension of economy. It links countries, regions and cities. Therefore, infrastructure is an important element for mutual economical, social and cultural relations. Transport network helps to develop commercial relations too. Infrastructure development has a positive effect on investments. It increases macroeconomics indicators, and economical growth in general. Here, Latvian Railway sees an opportunity to do more in the light of special relationships with United States of America, or saying with words from publication, building bridges across transforming shores. During recent years, the cooperation between United States of America and Latvia is expanding. Latvia, as a member of the states of NATO, considers the United States of America a key and strategical partner in the Baltic Sea security region. Only the stable and security environment it is possible to attract new investments and achieve good results of economical growth. Latvian Railway considers that the publication can strengthen our security relations, which could bring closer also transatlantic economical cooperation, in which Latvian Railway is very much interested. The development of transport hub system and connectivity with the United States of America is a necessary precondition for future cooperation. For the last 5 years, Latvian Railway has been already working in very close cooperation with the United States militaries in support of the military equipment movement by Latvian railway infrastructure. It's brought us a new experience and more insights in transatlantic cooperation when Latvian Railway considers doing more to strengthen our security environment, which should deliver also future economic benefits. Dear colleagues, once again, thank you for opportunity to support the new publications, and we are looking forward to future strengthening of strategical security and economical ties of Latvia and United States of America. And we are also looking to support the next publication like such, and we are always happy to support Institute, and it's really good cooperation between us, and good luck for everybody with this reading. I'm not read also, and I do immediately after this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bērziņš, for your kind words and support. And of course, we are very happy to learn, first of all, that there is a great interest in cooperating and expanding this cooperation with the United States. And I think there absolutely are the ways of doing it. And second one, of course, we are also very happy to hear that Latvian Railway is willing to support the think tank community. We highly appreciate it. Thank you. With this, we are closing the opening remarks session, and let's proceed to the first panel on security. So I would invite the distinguished panelists, speakers to the table so that we can start the first panel, please. Time is short, and I think that we can proceed almost immediately. Of course, security has been mentioned already on several occasions, and security has been one of the major topics in our interaction with the United States. And we highly, I think I can just repeat, we highly appreciate the words by Mr. Obama when he said that security and defense of Riga, Tallinn and Vilnius is as important as security and defense of Paris, Berlin and London. I always said that I'm not so sure if all the people from those cities would agree on this, but we hope that there is still a lot of like-minded approaches, and of course we appreciate the US support. Anyhow, so I stop here with my very short introductory remark for the panel, and we have distinguished panel of excellent speakers. And I would immediately start without introduction of the whole panel with introducing Ojārs Kalniņš, and I will introduce the other speakers in due course. Ojārs Kalniņš is the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of Latvian Parliament, and of course a long-standing Latvian ambassador in Washington back in the 1990s. So you are very well placed to see and to reassess and revisit the trajectories of Latvia-US interaction, especially in security field. Please, Ojārs, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Andris. I kind of wish I also had read this book like President Zatlers had, because I'd be a lot smarter for this panel, but maybe next time. Yes, when I look back at the last 25 years of restored U.S.-Latvian relations, I tend to focus on the first 8 because for 7 of those years I was ambassador during the Clinton administration. And when I focus on that, there are 2 particular events that stand out in terms of security and defense that I think were pivotal for setting the tone for everything that happened afterwards. First and foremost was the fact that in 93-94, the U.S. played a major role in negotiating the Russian troop withdrawal from Latvia. It was thanks to the Clinton administration and people in that administration like Nick Burns and Strobe Talbot, who actually worked very hard, and as we were told, it was actually up to Bill Clinton convincing Boris Yeltsin over a glass of vodka in Europe to agree to a compromise on Skrunda and on getting the Russian troops out. If we hadn't have done that in the early 90s, everything else that followed would have been much more difficult. The second, I think, very important U.S. gesture of support was that in 98, when NATO pursued its first enlargement, and it was clear that Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic would get in, but the Baltics wouldn't. As I understand it, a man who later became ambassador, or was ambassador at that time, Larry Napper, came up with an idea, and that is to create a U.S.-Baltic partnership. It was just a declaratory statement, and I know one cynical Estonian statesman said it was a consolation prize for not getting into NATO. But I think it was a very strong signal that we were on our way, that there was a special relationship between the U.S. and the Baltic states. And here I want to add another note. I know that this book is about U.S.-Latvian relations. I know that this panel is about U.S.-Latvian relations, but I think the Estonians could write a similar book, the Lithuanians could write a similar book, because U.S. policy has basically been toward the Baltic states. There may be individual cases, maybe individual issues that slightly differ, but when you look at the big issues, it was a Baltic policy. And it was very clear to us in Washington that if one country pursued something and went to Congress or the State Department, they wouldn't get it unless all 3 agreed. And there was a time when one of our neighbors thought they can get into NATO before the other 2, and they were told very quickly by Washington, it's all or nothing. And I think this is something, when we talk about Latvia and U.S. relations in terms of security and defense, it's really a Baltic policy. And the way I look at it is the Clinton administration opened the door for Baltic membership in NATO. The Bush administration brought us in. But the groundwork was set in the 90s. And here, too, there was one other event that happened even earlier than 1998, and 2 people that need to be singled out are Ron Asmus, the late Ron Asmus, and Bob Nurek. Because around 1996, I believe it was, no, 1990, Yeah, 1996, they put out a RAND paper talking about NATO enlargement, and if you bring in the Visegrad countries, what happens to the Baltics? And it was the first serious study that made it clear that it can't end with Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic. And you have to account for the Baltics. And in a way, I think that led to the US-Baltic partnership, and it started building the argument which had to be taken to Europe to convince the European NATO members that eventually brought us in 2004. As we all know, we've often heard this phrase that countries don't have friends, they just have interests. I've always felt that if you have common interests and you're also friends, you get along even better. But if you look at the history of US-Latvian relations, especially prior to World War II, it would be hard to see any US interests in this region, other than sending George Kennan here to spy on what's going on in Moscow. Latvia was important because we were next to Russia. But the Baltic states became a US interest the moment we were occupied. In 1940, the moment the non-recognition policy was established, and then suddenly that became an issue of principle. So that by the late 80s and the early 1990s, when the prospect of independence came up again, I think for the US, whether it was interests or friendship, it was a matter of principle to support the Baltics, because the US had stood by this policy that the Baltic states are occupied. And I think this is where, whatever other differences we may have about certain policy decisions, I think this is something we can be very grateful for, is the US stood on principle and led the way to helping the Baltic states reestablish international recognition and independence. Just moving very quickly to the end, I think everything that's been done in the last 25 years has been very supportive, but clearly when you talk about security, you have to look at the last 2 years. There's been a great deal of renewed activity thanks to NATO, thanks to the US, but primarily thanks to Vladimir Putin. Because if he hadn't annexed Crimea, if he hadn't invaded eastern Ukraine, none of this would have happened. It was only a few years before 2014 that NATO even started thinking about a Baltic strategy. Many thought it wasn't necessary because the scenario of the Baltics ever being invaded seemed totally unreal in 2011 or 2012 because Russia was a NATO partner. When we were candidates for NATO membership, we were told, don't say you're joining NATO to protect yourself against Russia. Russia's a partner, Russia's a friend. We have other issues to deal with. Of course, after 2014, the same people said, well, you were right all along, you could say it now. A great deal has been done. And I think just to single out the US, I mean, NATO, as far as everything that's happened since the Wales summit, I think has both reassured the Baltic states on NATO's commitment, and I think it's been a deterrent. If the Wales summit was reassurance and deterrence, both have been accomplished. Now we're talking about the Warsaw summit. That's supposed to be adaptation. It's dialogue and deterrence, but the deterrence is important. And one irony is that a couple of years ago, I and many others in foreign affairs here, and I think Andris probably had a conference on this, was asked about the US pivot to China. And does this mean the US is no longer interested in Europe? Well, that seems like ancient history now. There is no longer a US pivot to China. There may be a Latvian pivot to China or a Chinese pivot to Latvia. We have the 16+1 summit coming this fall here in Riga. But if anything, the US has pivoted back, gone full circle, and is recommitting to Europe, which is testified by the European Reassurance Initiative, 3.4 billion, which is being committed to Europe, Eastern Europe, to this region. And I think that's something that's very important. And the only thing I would add at the end, and what we're looking at as far as the Warsaw Summit goes, is that a great deal has been done to strengthen Baltic regional air policing. The US is committing now to ground support The one area that has been untouched but has to be addressed now is maritime security, the Baltic Sea region. And Latvia is already offering a very wonderful port in Liepāja as the place that could be a committed NATO port. So it's an area that we're looking at. As I understand it, the U.S. commitment is not to naval security at this point, but perhaps out of that $3.4 billion, we can get some investment in Liepāja. Thank you.
Ojārs, thanks for this very wide and I think very detailed and thorough overview, indicating these main trends within the trajectory and reminding us also that building the strategic partnership is everyday business. That also the key moments have been important, and using those key moments in our mutual interaction is also very important. So we should be quite ready and prepared for that one. Of course, interesting story was about the vodka diplomacy. I've heard quite similar story that Lech Walesa convinced Boris Yeltsin over vodka about the Polish membership of NATO. So, of course, this vodka diplomacy seems there are many stories, and in all of them, one of the centerpieces was Boris Yeltsin, not surprisingly. Even though, interestingly enough, as you mentioned, that Putin is partly serving as a motivator, as some kind of catalyst of the increased Baltic and Latvian and US interaction. So I don't know if I should say we should thank to Mr. Putin, but to some extent there are some positive developments or positive collateral effects of, let's say, what Putin is doing. Anyhow, thanks to Ojārs Kalniņš, and I am refraining myself from the questions because we have the quite limited time span. I'm immediately moving to our next speaker, and we are very delighted here to welcome speaker from the United States, because what would be this event without representative from the United States? And we have Michel, who is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, also with a long experience in public service, especially I understand in a Department of Defense. So you are very well placed to enlighten us with the American perspective. And of course, the question would be almost immediately, there is asymmetry between us. United States plays a crucial role for our security considerations. Is Latvia relevant in the US security considerations? Please, the floor is yours, Leo.
Thanks very much, and thanks to the Institute for inviting me. It is my first trip to Riga, but it's a beautiful city, and I'm sure I'll be back. The answer to your question is yes, but let me fill in the details a little bit later. The event takes place at a very opportune time, since you're going to have the EU summit late next month, followed just a couple weeks thereafter by the NATO summit in Warsaw. It's interesting to recall that in December 2003, when the first EU security strategy was written, it began with this following sentence: Europe has never been so prosperous, so secure, nor so free. And I think that when the High Representative, Madame Mogherini, presents her new draft late next month, I'm not sure that the tone is going to be quite so optimistic, given what's going on in the eastern neighborhood, given the challenges of migration and refugees, and of course the increased terrorist threat, exemplified by the recent attacks in Paris and again in Brussels. Now, similarly, following the Russian aggression in Ukraine, NATO leaders agreed, as you'll recall at the 2014 summit in Wales, to a number of measures to strengthen their capability to meet the Article 5 of the NATO treaty, the article committing to collective defense. But don't forget that NATO also demanded at that time that Moscow end its illegitimate occupation of Crimea and stop supporting the separatists in eastern Ukraine. But since Wales, unfortunately, and it's clear to everyone in this room, Russia has continued a pattern of bad behavior. This includes not only their continued involvement in the Donbass with men, with heavy equipment, heavy weapons, and command and control, actually, and its provocative military activities in this region, in the Nordic region, and so forth. Now, the security challenges in the current environment, I think, are well described in this book, which I have read. So I don't want to dwell on that, and I'm sure it's a sophisticated audience, you understand that as well. So I want to look ahead and focus on these upcoming meetings and go beyond. With regard to the NATO summit in Warsaw, I think NATO is going to continue and in some areas expand what it agreed upon at Wales. These likely will include some combination of the following: deployment on a persistent basis of more NATO land forces in the Baltics and in Poland, possibly a battalion in each of those countries, probably a battalion headed by the UK, Germany, the United States, and I'm told possibly one that would be put together by the Visegrad countries. This would be accompanied, I believe, by an intensified program of NATO exercises to include increasing participation by NATO partners Finland and Sweden, and not the only, but I would say increased NATO civilian and military attention to the very difficult problems associated with the so-called hybrid warfare, whether that's new or not we can debate, but also Russian development of what is called the anti-axis aerial denial capabilities. And I can detail some of these in the question period if you'd like. I'd like to say a few words about something that's not mentioned very much in polite company, and that is that NATO also cannot neglect the nuclear component of its deterrent strategy for a few reasons. After all, Russian nuclear capabilities are being modernized. They have deployed new types of land and sea-based intercontinental ballistic missiles, a new strategic cruise missile, and that they have modernized their heavy bombers. More worrisome in a way than this modernization are the things that are surrounding it. Revisions of military doctrine that suggest at least that that Russia might consider a nuclear escalation strategy to de-escalate a conventional conflict that it might lose. Russian military exercises over the past few years have in fact included simulated nuclear strikes on Poland and NATO partner Sweden. And since the annexation of Crimea, President Putin and many of his senior officials have made a number of very provocative statements about the possible role of nuclear weapons in Europe. So what steps should NATO consider at the Warsaw Summit and beyond? And I'll just list several, and I'll be very brief on these. I think the alliance is going to have to set the record straight on what the Russians are doing and saying about nuclear weapons. And this also includes increasing our scholarship and our intelligence to better understand their thinking on nuclear weapons. These are skills that have in fact atrophied since the end of the Cold War. Second, I think NATO is going to have to strengthen its own declaratory policy. We need to reduce the risk that Russian leaders might miscalculate the costs of aggression toward any NATO ally. Third, since deterrence cannot be based on bluffing, NATO is going to have to agree on reasonable steps to ensure that its nuclear forces continue to be capable and to be seen as capable. Fourth, I think NATO will have to look at new ways to demonstrate solidarity behind its nuclear declarations and activities. One example might be regular visits by the North Atlantic Council and the Military Committee to nuclear force installations in the United States and Europe. Now, it's true that NATO must keep open channels of communication with Russia, at a minimum to prevent an accident or an incident from dangerously escalating. But if it's correct, and I believe it's correct, that among President Putin's foremost strategic goals is to weaken and ultimately fracture the alliance by undermining our mutual trust and solidarity, I believe that NATO needs to disabuse him of this notion at every level. But NATO solidarity is also vital in dealing with other regions. Operation Resolute support in Afghanistan provides critical assistance to that country's hard-pressed government and military and security forces. This is not a risk-free mission, I will remind you. I know that about 22 Latvian soldiers are there, but this is not an impossible mission either. Several NATO allies also are contributing to the US-led coalition combating Daesh in Iraq and Syria, but NATO as a whole could do more to complement and support that coalition. For example, perhaps by deploying its airborne warning and control system, which would help those allies conducting surveillance or conducting strikes in that region. NATO might also want to approve the Iraqi government's request to move its current training activities, which take place in Jordan, to Iraq, where they'd be more effective if they were in country. Now, Latvia, of course, is a member of both NATO and the EU, so I want to mention just very briefly the importance of closer coordination between those two organizations. This got off to a rocky start. I know I was in the Pentagon working on this issue at the time, but thankfully, practical cooperation between the European Union and NATO has developed in many areas. This has included peacekeeping in the Balkans, counter-piracy operations off East Africa, and even police training in Afghanistan. And the EU economic sanctions on Russia, which are important, and I would say important to maintain as well, have complemented NATO's deterrent efforts. One priority area for this increased cooperation, I believe, should be and will be looking or reducing the vulnerabilities of NATO allies, most of whom, of course, are EU members, against hybrid warfare. There are other possibilities with regard to cooperation on the refugee and migrant issue, assistance to Libya, and so forth. And finally, and in anticipation of some questions on this, I do want to say a few words about the discussion of NATO and transatlantic relations in the United States. The Atlantic Council is a nonpartisan organization, but I'm allowed to have my views. I understand why many in Europe are bewildered and sometimes alarmed by some of the false assertions and some of the angry rhetoric that you've heard or read about during the presidential primary campaign. Now, having worked on NATO issues and transatlantic relations for many years within government and now outside of government, I am convinced the populist appeals for a so-called America First strategy, combined with what appears to me to be a condescending view of America's allies, does not, and I want to repeat, it does not represent the core principles of our foreign policy and defense communities, or I believe the majority of Congress, or I believe the American public. So today's discussion on Latvia in the United States reminds us of the fundamental importance of defending our shared values. And frankly, I believe that the principles that have guided American policy since the end of the Cold War, and which, by the way, are eloquently expressed in the text of the NATO treaty, will survive our election in November. So with that guardedly optimistic prediction, I thank you for your attention and look forward to your questions.
Leo, thanks a lot for providing the American perspective, and I think you were very diplomatic in not mentioning Donald Trump even once. But I assume we'll come back to this if there is still time for it, and I hope there is time for this. With this, I'm happy to give floor to Gunda Reire, who is a very good colleague of mine, and she was also one of the authors, and she is also director of the Center for International Studies. And just recently, she was a Fulbright Fellow at Center for Transatlantic Relations in Washington, D.C. I had a chance to be like 4 or 5 years ago to be the same fellow of the same place. So I am envious that you came just recently back from Washington. Gunda, but you wrote an article on the security, and your article started with title, or your actually article's title was or is "Fresh or New Start is Needed." That's exactly what Donald Trump is saying. Is something wrong with the previous life between us? Please, Gunda, I know that I'm a little bit provocative, but it's my task to be a bit devil's advocate
well,
here.
it
Please.
was too provocative, I think. Well, good afternoon, Your Excellencies, my dear colleagues and friends. My task is to be the bad cop today. And although I really strongly believe in strategic partnership between the United States and Latvia, I'll show you the most disturbing gaps and probably foggy areas in our relationships. When thinking about the US-Latvia relations, we actually see a triangular love, and the third party here is Russia. But such relationships cannot be healthy and will always have a negative outcome because at least one party will always remain deeply unsatisfied. I even don't have to bring examples to you because the whole history of the last century is a proof to that. One of the most dangerous points in our relations is a tradition of self-deception in the West. Instead of looking the reality directly in the eyes, it has been easier to nurse an unreserved hope for positive conversation with Russia. Nevertheless, this desperate thinking and hope for the end of history has led to belief in a beautiful Fata Morgana. But as we know, there are not desperate situations, there are only desperate people, and self-deception is the worst form of deception at large. Even more, the Harvard study in psychology has acknowledged that the end of history illusion could be thought of as a lack of long-term thinking. An analysis of Russia's strategic documents proves that Russia is predictable and performs in a rational manner. But this rationality differs very much from the Western one. Russia's strategic documents speak about buffer zones where Latvia and its neighboring countries belong to, and uncover unconcealed antagonism towards the US and NATO. Moreover, Russia doesn't see itself in the system of collective security and prefers flexible coalitions. Conceptually, if broadly accepted and complied with, such international affairs doctrine would mean deconstruction of the system of collective security and the frantic conversion of global international relations to the robust form of jus bellum justum, the sacred right to go to war. Speaking about the United States, in regard to Latvia and the Baltics, the most dangerous is the frivolous way the President of the US assesses the international behavior of the President of the Russian Federation. Recently, Obama has explained to Atlantics, and I'm quoting here, "The truth is, actually, Putin, in all of our meetings, is scrupulously polite, very frank. He never keeps me waiting 2 hours like he does a bunch of these other folks. He's constantly interested in being seen as our peer and as working with us because, and attention here, because he's not completely stupid." Such conviction proves that the United States president still hasn't understood the level of strategic game he has been involved in. Now, the next question, which occupies the minds here in Latvia, is what kind of changes will the next president of the US establish in US foreign policy doctrine for future years? Despite being relatively low on agenda for many years, it is high time for the United States to recognize that Europe, and particularly the Baltic states and Latvia, are still on the map. It is important both for Latvia's security and the security of NATO, because without American leadership, NATO frontline allies are not capable of dealing with Russia's threats, either in a military or information warfare domain. In the US, two mainstream thoughts dominate regarding the future role of NATO in existing hybrid situation. The first one emphasizes the purely military character of NATO, where different hybrid warfare elements do not belong to. This viewpoint sees the role of NATO in terms of a battlefield. Nevertheless, there also exists the so-called battle space, which is broader than the battlefield and capable of dealing with challenges and threats more efficiently. The West must be aware of the means and tools which Russia uses in information and hybrid warfare against Latvia and other member states, and to be ready to address a variety of new challenges. It is also high time for NATO to expand the Article 5 and to prove in real decision-making that it is capable for more than drafting visionary documents. And I mean the hybrid war strategy which was adopted in the Wales Summit last year here. Therefore, the task number one for strengthening the ties between the US and Latvia is to acknowledge that Russia reveals itself as a military threat, and is willing to create stable buffer zones, challenge Western solidarity and unity, and establish specific international relations with the United States where Russia's national and international interests are fully accepted. Without such a clear sight, the possible consequences only become worse. It is evident that in order to secure the NATO external border, military tools are not enough. Societal resilience must also be addressed because political uncertainty or even political subversion is not only highly possible, but also as dangerous as a military intervention in the region. In its turn, Latvia has to be able to work with the society in a more effective manner. The feeling of disconnection from the state in the society and high readiness to soak up the ideas embedded in psychological operations and hostile propaganda become more and more evident here. This calls for a revision of existing society integration strategy, emphasis on media literacy skills, and smart societal resilience activities. Dear colleagues and friends, I will wrap up here by paraphrasing Hannah Arendt's philosophy on ivory tower of thinking. And doing this, we can say that collective security doesn't imply decision-making that takes place protected in an ivory tower, but it is an activity that breaks down the dichotomy between decision-makers and societies. Dismantling the ivory tower involves relocating the decision-maker in the world and at the same time proclaiming the urgent need for societies to assume the task of thinking. This may be irrelevant or of restricted relevance for the future of the world, but it is not irrelevant for the future of a free and democratic man. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm open to vibrant discussion when Andris will allow it. Thank you.
Gunda, thank you for the very vibrant presentation. And when you spoke about the unpredictability or predictability of Russia, I'm reminded by Churchill that Russia is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. But absolutely, I agree with you that actually we have some instruments, some analytical tools, some toolboxes still to understand Russia. And I think this willingness to find a common understanding of Russia, I think in this regard is very important for us. And in the context what you mentioned, we need this fresh start, even how we treat, how we deal with external threats, risks, and partners as well. And one is external, but second, I think you mentioned a very important element on societal resilience, that it's not just about external environment, but also very much within the countries itself. Yeah, and it actually refers to the United States as well. But with this, I am very happy to open the floor to comments and questions. We have 15 minutes for the first panel, so please raise your hands, introduce yourself, and ask the question or the comment, please. Yes.
Thank you for your presentations. My name is Andris Sprūds. I'm creative director of Audiovisual Media Arts Department at Resebe University. And my question will be for Ojārs Kalniņš. And to understand my question, I will give you a little bit of context. I'm sure you've seen a few weeks ago, there was a production of Chekhov's Three Sisters on Edvīns Theater. Now, prior to that, and that was obviously on the big stage. Prior to that few months, there was Angels in America by Tony Kushner. I'm sure Michael knows, who is probably the most celebrated American playwright in the 20th century and whose productions are played on the biggest and best US stages, was shelved in the corner. It had a very small stage and performed for a few months and it closed. In the same context, I was, the other day, I was reviewing the license of the Academy of Culture for Latvia, which, as you know, prepared the future Latvian artists in dance, theater, and film. And what I noticed, there is very few actually courses that are dedicated to arts, especially to the American greatest theater directors, like Lee Strasberg, like Sanford Meisner, or Stella Adler, or Jutta Hagen. And actually I asked Vice Rector why, in spite of the fact the United States has the biggest influence on theatrical and film scene in the world, has such a very little emphasis and attention in one of the most important educational establishments in Latvia. In my personal view, there is very little weak sort of influx of the American arts in Latvia, and we talk about the gaps and weak points. And this is sort of vacuum that Russia uses very effectively through media, through television, through films. And my question is, what can Parliament can do to sort of modify the situation? Because I'm, as a taxpayer of Latvia, I'm supporting, obviously, with my taxes, Jaunais teātris, Dailės teātris, and why I have to see this Chekhov's three sisters on the big stage, and I'm not allowed to see Tony Kushner's Angels in America on big stage. Thank you.
Let's take perhaps a couple of questions. Thank you for this question. I think it puts in a very interesting light as well. And absolutely, when we discuss about the culture and people-to-people interaction, I think this also is very relevant. But here are the members of the parliament. I cannot not give the floor also to the members of the parliament. Please, Veiko.
Veiko Spoli, Saeima. I have a question to Leo Michel. Actually, you expressed kind of very pragmatic view that regardless of whoever happens to be elected as a president of the United States, still the American foreign policy would continue pretty much in the same way. However, if we're looking on the way as campaign goes now, particularly how Bernie Sanders supporters are gaining such a loud voice and support. So basically I would argue that even if there's a positive situation that actually Hillary Clinton wins the race finally, actually her base would be so leftist that actually she would be required by her base voters to change the tack and act the way as American voters want. And there are certain disagreements and grievances amongst the public. So do you have any comment on this? Thank you.
Simple question to Leo Michel. After this nonsense of Brexit, and even if England stays, which is sheer madness, as we all know, has Germany replaced Britain as America's key player in the European Union? Because Germany is the glue keeping the European Union together, and it's the most powerful country.
Okay, let's go back perhaps to the panel, and then we have a second quick round as well to the second round of questions. Please,
I have a very quick response to your question. A few years ago, a reporter asked me about the Americanization of Latvia, and I laughed because I said until baseball becomes the #1 sport in this country, until McDonald's becomes the most popular restaurant in Riga, which it isn't, and until country music replaces Latvian folk music, I don't think you could even talk about that. Now, I know Latvian Schlager music is starting to pick up on country, so there's a little bit of creeping Americanization. But what you're describing is a phenomenon that most of our cultural people are more familiar with Russian culture, which is next door, European culture, than they are with American culture, other than what we see in the movies and more on the internet. I don't know if the Kardashians are a representative of culture, but that's what people are exposed to. Whether the parliament can change that, I think we can encourage it, but in a way culture is market-driven. It's driven by interest and by the directors and the people who choose these items. But I see more and more Tennessee Williams and others showing up. I think as people are exposed to it, the audience will grow. And also as an appreciation of the English language grows in this country.
But do you agree that that's not substantial enough to actually, because it is a sort of soft power that Russia uses very effectively? And unfortunately, there's also sort of resentment amongst very famous also theater and arts people in Latvia actually to bring in more influence of American culture. It's not only, replacing Schlager music with the country music, etc. There's still quite a bit of sort of cliche resentment.
I think the best thing to do is this has to be written about and talked about in our media. We have to get a bigger discussion going about it.
Thank you. Thank you. Leo, please.
Yes,
Gunda, please.
Yeah?
Okay.
You hear me. Well, I also have a short comment. Yes, indeed, you mentioned that culture and theater belongs to the soft power, and indeed, it is one of the main 4 channels how the soft power is executed. But I must say that, firstly, I think that Chekhov's Three Sisters in Dzelzceļš maybe is not the most disturbing example of Russia's soft power through cultural channel here, because of course we can see Russia's cultural house performing staging different plays, and there are lots of events taking place there, and of course every week there are Russia's artists giving concerts in Latvia. So maybe let's not blame Chekhov. Yes, maybe, yes. And the other comment, I think, your question about what Parliament can do and your taxpayer, yeah? But I think that what concerns culture in those soft power channels, these issues cannot be regulated by law or simply in a bureaucratic manner. It's a very, very sensitive point you touched upon, and thank you for that question. But I must say that, the cure to this problem isn't in law. Thank you.
It cannot be imposed. Leo, please.
Well, you're determined to draw me out, and I'm happy to do that. I certainly didn't mean to suggest in any way that it doesn't matter who's elected president. It matters greatly. I respectfully but strongly disagree putting President Obama and frivolous in the same sentence. The president makes decisions. It's because of the president that you see the U.S. troops here and in your Baltic neighbors. It's because of the president that you see the strong increase in terms of the U.S. position in NATO, which is helping. It's not the only one, but it's helping to draw other Europeans to assume their greater share of their responsibilities as well. It definitely does make a difference. I think the president deserves a lot of credit for what goes on, and I wouldn't rely too heavily on the quote taken out of context here or there by others. I think it's important actually to read his speeches, and you get, I think, a better view of what the man believes, and judge him by his acts, and I think they've been pretty good. With regard to Bernie Sanders, I think Bernie Sanders has performed a very useful role in the primary. He's raised a lot of important issues, but he really hasn't said much about foreign affairs, aside from his criticism really of Secretary Clinton because she had initially supported the war. We'll see how this turns out, but I'd be very surprised if most of the senators' support did not end up voting for Secretary Clinton. He himself has said that in his view, the worst thing that could happen would be the election of Mr. Trump. With regard to Mr. Trump, I am aghast at the fact-free zone that he observes when he's talking about foreign policy and defense policy in general. It goes beyond, I think, some ignorance about what our European allies contribute. His representation of the facts about who pays for NATO and who doesn't, it's really skewed and incorrect. I'm glad I'm no longer a U.S. government employee. I'm free to speak my mind on this, and I will. He said many irresponsible things to suggest that it would be indifferent. One should be indifferent if Japan or South Korea or even Saudi Arabia were to acquire nuclear weapons. I think this is at the height of irresponsibility. With regard to Brexit, I guess I've been clear enough on that subject. With regard to Brexit, the British will make their decision, of course. I'm one of those who believe that President Obama said the right things about Brexit. They needed to be said. Not only what he said in the UK, but what he said a few days later in his speech about the importance of the transatlantic relationship, a speech that he gave in Germany. Will Germany replace the UK? You know, we have a lot of important relations in Europe. My father is French. My name is Michel. Who would guess, right? But the French have become, over the past years, and particularly I'd say over the past few years, exceptionally close and very good military partners of the United States, and a role within NATO that one would not have expected 10 years ago or so. Germany does play a very important role economically, but it requires consensus for many of the things it needs to do in the EU, just as we require consensus in NATO. And the UK, I don't want to predict what's going to happen on the vote, but I would say that we have such a deep cultural, political, also defense, also intelligence tie with the United Kingdom, that the idea that if they were to vote to leave the EU, that somehow that would suffer, I'd be skeptical. I think it would not be helped. It would not be helped, but I think many of these close ties would endure and should endure.
Thank you. Just one comment, since I'm a politician, I can get away with this. I think the people in the UK who believe the UK would be better off outside of the EU are no different than the people who think the United States would be better off with Donald Trump as president. I think they operate on the same level of rationality.
Since I promised a last question to Jānis Eigmanis, please short question, and we're back to the panel, and then we can proceed with second one. Please. No, it's not. I think it was.
Yes. My question is relating to what was sort of mentioned but passed by quickly. And that is that not only Mr. Michel, but others, various leaders around the world, or certainly in Europe and in North America, talk about having a dialogue with Russia. You got to maintain the dialogue with Russia. But they don't go any further than that. It stops there. And then the question is, what is the content of the dialogue? Now, it seems to me that either they're just throwing that us as a phrase that has no content at all, and it's just for, I don't know what purpose. It's sort of floating in the air, but has no legs. Or it means something. And then the question is, when you start thinking about what is the content of the dialogue, then I think roughly we know what the Russian want the content to be. And I think it was the Speaker of the Russian Parliament says basically it's a recognition of the Yalta System Light. Well, if that's their position, and that is what the content of that dialogue from their point of view will be, then the question is, is there anybody in the West who's prepared to sit down and in some way or another talk about that content? And then, of course, immediately you come to the question of, well, Ukraine becomes maybe a critical element in creating that dialogue and that content. And I don't want to throw in Trump again, but as you recall, he said he could sit down with Putin and make a deal. Well, I don't know.
Come to the question,
Okay.
and so we can.
I'm just interested in what your thoughts on that are.
So please, back to the panel for final remarks, final thoughts, please.
Just about dialogue. A dialogue is necessary, and let's not forget that one of the sponsors of this event is Latvian Railroad. Latvia has a dialogue with Russia. 80% of our rail business is with Russia. If we didn't have a dialogue, we wouldn't have rail business. There are areas where you can communicate, and you've got to try to keep those open, hopefully to bring about change in the others. But I agree that when it comes to Ukraine and Crimea, we've got to take a very strong line. But there are other places, there are other ways of trying to move on a dialogue. I think the people who are engaged in it understand that for the most part.
Look, I'm still a bit of a creature of the Cold War, which is where I grew up working at the CIA and later in the Pentagon. In the Pentagon doing negotiations with the Soviets and then the Russians at times when tensions were very high. It takes time, but here and there one makes progress. Even with a very recalcitrant military establishment, we were able, just after the breakup of the Soviet Union, and we actually started even before it collapsed, to work with them on assistance to help protect the security of their nuclear weapons and eventually to help destroy their chemical weapons. So you can get practical things. It takes a long time. It is important to maintain channels of cooperation. As I said, the Russians have performed an extraordinary series of very risky maneuvers in airspace, on territorial waters. Some of their short notice land exercises can be very worrisome. We have to keep some sort of a dialogue. Does it mean that we're naive? That the government as a whole is naive about it? No. I'll just give you one example. We worked, and my office did this beginning in the early 90s, in discussions with the Russians about missile defense. I hear the propaganda, it continues, but really, from what we've shown the Russians, there is no credible argument that US or NATO missile defenses pose any threat to Russian strategic systems. And believe me, Russian technicians are smart enough to know the trajectories of missiles. They know the speed of missiles. They know certainly their own capabilities. So by having a certain dialogue, you're able to actually just dismiss the myths and make them harder for them to hold on to. This is true in other areas as well.
Gunda?
Yes, about the content of the dialogue with Russia. Actually, I share partly the same view that reading between the lines, the content of this strange dialogue, which actually isn't a dialogue, is fear from a nuclear war, and this element is very strong here. One is evident. The post-Cold War era has ended, and it ended in 2014, and the new era is right now emerging, and what we are observing and we are part of is a great struggle about how the world will look like. And that's, I think, the most important element of these strange relationships with Russia, because nothing is certain right now, and nobody knows how the world will look like in 3 or 5 or 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Gunda. Thanks. Many thanks to the speakers. We discussed US-Latvian relationship, and we always go back to Russia. Russia, I think, is an important topic, but still it is an important topic, let's face it as well. We just scratched the surface of security debate in many ways, and we touched just upon some of the questions, even though I think we also outlined the spectrum of those issues. But please, of course, read the book, and you will have a more detailed and thorough information as well on security debate from both from Latvian perspective and from US perspective, and certainly also we will find Russian topic here in the book as well. I am thankful once more to the distinguished speakers, especially Michel, for joining us, representing the United States, enlightening us a bit also on the Donald Trump phenomenon. And we can, of course, continue also the coffee break or end. But now please join me the round of applause for the speakers. I am inviting change the seats, and please, the second panel, we proceed immediately. We have 40 minutes of economic debate. Rada? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We continue and you have a coffee break at the very end. Let's go on. It seems that everybody is quite thirsty already after the first panel, but we still have to be a little bit patient, and I think this panel will be also very interesting because in security field we can recognize a lot of common strategic interests, and also I think there are a lot of progress what we've done. In the economic domain, there are more and more challenges. So not everything has been perfect, and there is still a windows of opportunities of cooperation. And we have excellent panel of distinguished speakers, all Latvian. Speaking of Americanization, we are still using English as lingua franca, which shows that, well, the English is, or also partly Americanness is here. We're very happy to communicate in English. And I am immediately giving the floor to Mārtiņš Bondars, who is a member of Latvian Parliament, who has also I think a lot of experience within the United States, and recently, if I'm not mistaken, correct me, you graduated from Harvard University.
Same year as you were in the States.
Yeah, just I didn't graduate from Harvard. That's a slight difference. But that's why I think, taking into account your MBA in Harvard, you are very well placed, and your, of course, banking experience, you are very well placed to enlighten us on the status of economic interaction between us. Have we reached the sky in our economic engagement between Latvia and the United States? Please, Mārtiņš, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, Andris, yes, we have reached certain sky in our economic cooperation, and skies in press releases, how many we can make with current status of our economic relations, either exports or imports. And on Tuesday, I had a phone conversation with a friend of mine who is also involved in certain, let's say, businesses with the United States, and I said I have to participate today in the panel and talk about economic cooperation between the States and Latvia. And he asked me, why do you politicians like to talk about things that doesn't exist? And of course, from one side I can agree with him, and this side is statistics, because import plus export of Latvia and US is a little bit more than estimated annual turnover of famous basketball club Knicks. And this is, of course, very, very, very limited if we are talking about two state entities' economic cooperation. At the same time, I disagree with him, because there are certain parts of our economic cooperation that doesn't show in statistics. And this is skills and knowledge that is being sold by our compatriots who hold Latvian passport in the United States. I mentioned New York Knicks. Well, you all know Kristaps Bērziņš. I know that Andris said I can mention only him if I tell that he is from city of Liepāja. Yes, he is from city of Liepāja. Kristīna Opalais, Andris Nelsons, Līvija Medne, whom you probably don't know, but she's working in genetics in Philadelphia. Some other young Latvians who are scientists working in developing the newest drugs this world will see probably in 3-4 years. And this is in no statistics. Those are Latvian stars. They have been raised and partly educated in this country. So if we are looking at export-import, yes, there's nothing to be proud of. If we are looking at our individuals who have had ambition, desire, and drive to succeed, yes, we have to be very proud of. because US is a very competitive place. You cannot be there just because of your last name or first name. Then what to do in the future with US statistics, as we call, what to do for Andris Pildegovičs in order to improve press releases. There are definitely few things what he can do. First of all, if we want to export more, we have to have more US investment in Latvia. Sounds strange, right? But US investment that gives entry to US market and brings knowledge to Latvia and utilizes our, let's say, competitive advantages and brings certain part of it back to the US. How do we attract US investment? Well, there are certain problematic areas. First of all, if we are looking from US hedge funds, if we are looking from US financial institutions, there are only 3.5 countries in Europe. Germany, France, UK, and a little bit Italy. That's it, no more. Central Eastern Europe, invest big money-wise, doesn't exist. So in order to get here US investment, it's only private contacts. Using our superstars, whom I mentioned, using our political leverage, using our contacts, our friends, we can do it. There is certain skills needed, but I believe it can be assembled. They can be assembled. So US investment first. Second that can be done, there are the same kind of people, like I mentioned before, stars that already are in the US who are currently in Latvia, but want to be part of US market, either companies or individuals. So for Latvia's politicians and diplomats, this is prime target how to increase export of Latvian goods and services. Helping them to open doors in the United States, helping them to get market, helping them to achieve. And it is possible. It is possible. I can give a little bit elaborated speech on this, but there is no time right now to do so. And of course, thirdly, I want to talk also about imports from United States. What state can do import-wise. And I will not talk about military procurements or anything like this. I will talk about education. We have to get the world's best education to Latvia. How do we get it? Yes, those girls and boys who get into the best schools of the US, Latvian government should help to finance, to get them in there and get them back to Latvia. This is a way how we can get good imports, good quality imports from the United States. This is our task to do it. So 3 things: more investment, look for our stars and open them doors, and import education. That's how we can improve our statistics, not only our individual successes. Thank you.
Mārtiņš, thanks a lot for the, first of all, frank assessment of the status of economic interaction and also your recommendations. I think especially the last one here among the young people would be very highly appreciated. No, absolutely, I subscribe to this. I think it is the future. And I think you also very smartly and nicely and efficiently connected those 2 things, the economics with people to people, that they are not separated things, that they are very much interconnected in many ways. And even if sometimes statistics are not so good, the human capital is a centerpiece of this interaction, and we should do a lot more in that one, but still already something has been done, and we can be proud of some things already which have been achieved in this domain. Thanks to Mārtiņš, and I proceed with Ēriks Rostovskis, who is president of Latvian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Ēriks, you also have a long experience in educational domain. We are very happy to have you on a board as well. And please, we discussed it previously. Would you say that Latvian business, Latvian human capital within business domain is mentally ready for dealing with the United States? Please, Ēriks, the floor is yours.
We need the time. First of all, thank you, Andris and Institute, for inviting me to participate in this event and be a part of discussion. From my point of view, this discussion and book opening event is more about relations, and I agree with Mārtiņš because, if more and more people create relations between, then afterwards business as well are increasing, and this is the right formula in all parts of the world. But if you look from Chamber's point of view, and we work in mostly in three fields: business climate, export, and our members' capacity. And if you look from all those fields, our relations with United States are critically important. Business climate. Each businessman understand, and if the climate is not secure and safety, then for businessmen it's not possible to succeed. And our participation in NATO is very important, and we understand that the United States played I will say main role in that organization. Next one is export, and of course United States is largest economy in the world, and of course for us like for small economy it's very important, and of course it's we need time because of course if we compare now and some 20 years ago, then distance was very important part, but now we know internet and air connection, all these things make more easy, and we can see very good examples like mikrotīkls, Valmiera stikla šķiedra, and soft technique, and then slowly some our Latvian companies create kind of success stories in the United States. And of course our members' capacity, like Mārtiņš was telling, education, but not only education, I will say for all countries which came from Soviet area, which is post-Soviet countries, this touching from United States like market economy, this touching is very important because, for our society it's very important, and all those three things is very significant. And I agree with Mārtiņš, then investments as well is very important point. Okay, we know, I hope, a good example, Citadela, but I hope then many investments from United States will come here, and then through this cooperation between people to people, we will create these relations in more and more higher level. And but really, I see the good future because again, if we compare my generation or generation which is more older or young generation, then all this young generation, they know English language very well, they have internet connection, and I'm pretty sure then slowly this level will increase. And if we put on the table some challenges, then I will put few things. One is this TTIP agreement. It's very important to cut all these barriers between our entrepreneurs, especially for small businesses. And other thing which will be very interesting, how will be these relations in the world, like, because now we are in a part on side of Europe, but we understand now China are still growing very fast, and we can see what will happen in future. And I hope then our relations with United States and this opening this all borders like TTIP with West world and kind of agreement with East world as well will help to be more successful in Latvia. And of course I will not touch the numbers, but I hope you will find all these numbers in book. And thank you for Institute, and thank you.
Yes, thank you for your thoughts, for your reflections as well. I think indicating that the economics take place in some environment, in wider political security environment, and also in environment of generational change, in environment of TTIP, or namely transatlantic trade discussions. So of course Latvia is also part of this, and it's not easy always to navigate because we are small and the market is small. But at the same time, again, the centerpiece of this generational dynamic and dynamism, that it is important, and we can hope that there will be more and more opportunities with new people, young people joining the interaction and also using the business opportunities. And I am happy to proceed with Kristīne Bērziņa, who is Transatlantic Fellow at the German Marshall Fund of the United States. And Kristīne has also been a long colleague of ours and been cooperating with Latvian Institute of International Affairs, and has spent quite a considerable time within the United States. So I think you know very well the mentality, the fabric of both societies, Latvian and American. And you, of course, are the author of the article on energy. Is energy this big opportunity finally to connect also Latvia with the United States? Please, Kristīne, the floor is yours.
Andrei, thank you, and it's wonderful to be here this afternoon. Is energy the great opportunity? The sub-question would be an opportunity for what? And that is pretty much the nature of the chapter in this book. Right now, it's a very unique moment in the energy systems and business and policies in the United States, but in Latvia as well. The United States is now one of the biggest, if not the biggest, energy superpower in this past year. The US surpassed Russia and Saudi Arabia as the biggest oil producer. In 2009, it surpassed Russia as the main gas producer. This has a great business aspect for the states, but the United States has also harnessed this politically, for example, in the State Department creating a Bureau for Energy Resources to really make sure that any changes that happen in this business technical energy side also have a political effect, because understanding the strategic important nature of energy. So the US is changing in terms of its business, but also in terms of the way it can use that in its foreign policy influence. In Latvia, we see a similar transformation in changing the system here, opening the gas market next year, and allowing for new sources of gas to come in here, and for the system to really enter a European space in the business structure. But this also has a big political role, and Latvia has been very involved in creating the European Energy Union during its presidency of the European Union, having those initial conversations here in Riga, and having conversations on these issues in Washington frequently. So you also see a political as well as a business aspect of energy in Latvia. So both things are transforming at the same time in the States, in Latvia, and there are two important aspects that could happen here that are full of potential. First aspect is business. Could there be direct trade? Could American natural gas molecules specifically wind up heating Riga? Or on the other side, what are the political benefits that we can really gain from these changing series of circumstances on both sides of the ocean? I would argue that the political and strategic dimension is the one that we can bank on, that we already see the benefits of, and that will continue to grow. And I think we can be hopeful for what happens on the business side. And regardless of whether there are American molecules in the power plants in Riga, we already see that the existence of American gas is helping keep Riga warm for less money today. So on the strategic side, we have America opening this Bureau of Energy Resources has under Secretary Clinton. We have a bigger influence, therefore, and the U.S. has the opportunity to have a bigger footprint on issues such as Ukraine, Crimea, sanctions, which of course are related to the energy sector with Russia, and also in creating European institutions and helping and consulting on the creation of the European Energy Union. These are big projects that the U.S. is very invested in. In all of these conversations, representatives of the U.S. government have come to Europe and explained the strategic and foreign policy importance of these questions for them. The U.S. is also very invested in liberalizing the Latvian energy market, very interested in Latvia passing all the reforms under the EU's third energy package so that it becomes integrated with its neighbors. Mr. Michel from the Atlantic Council was talking about the Baltic policy from Washington, and that's what I see on energy all the time. The U.S. isn't interested in Latvia per se, only for Latvia's transitions, but it's interested in having a Baltic space. It is interested in having the potential for LNG to go from Lithuania up to Tallinn and using strategic underground storage infrastructure in Latvia for the good of the European Union and for the good of the region. And so you see that the U.S. investment in energy really is, the political capital is being spent in a regional approach in order to achieve reforms here. Now, on the business side, the U.S., as of February 25th, became an LNG exporter. So liquefied natural gas molecules are leaving from Sabine Pass on the Gulf Coast and are crossing oceans. There have been 9 shipments thus far. Of the 9 ships have left, and those ships have gone to Brazil and Argentina, but they've also gone to Portugal and India and Dubai. These ships are therefore connecting the U.S. directly to markets around the world, including to Europe. We haven't seen them come through into the Baltic Sea yet, but it's a liquid market, and I think there's reason to think that that could very well happen. We will see that increase as well. There's always a question about U.S. exports and whether they will be permitted to the extent that there will be enough to really come to Europe. Currently, we see that there are one functioning train of LNG production, and then we have 5 more under construction and 3 more that are permitted but are not yet under construction. If all of the ones that are permitted produce, they could meet Latvia's demand, annual demand for natural gas within 3 days. So really, if everything comes online, there's a lot of gas out there, a lot of gas that can come from America to Europe, to wherever it needs to go. And I think that permits aren't really the biggest question in terms of whether the trade will happen or not. The things to be more concerned about is simply the economics of it. The gas prices in America are very low, but they're also currently low elsewhere, and the business case for sending shipments somewhere far away is perhaps less salient. So can we see a slowdown in the number of companies in Europe in the States that want to export? Perhaps. They wanted to export gas when it was very expensive in Japan. Now it's not so expensive, so who knows? But in any case, I think there's lots of potential for strategic partnership on EU Energy Union issues, as well as for potentially some business ties as well.
Christine, thank you. And I should thanks to Maris also for fulfilling a little bit of duty of moderator, and that's I see that Christina was looking at Maris. But I could still add to this, and I think it's good to see that there is one additional domain of potential cooperation, that there is a potential for the increasing interaction. And as you spoke about those molecules, that if we finally would see the American natural gas molecules, we would say it is indicative of real transformation also of Latvian and Baltic regional gas markets. At the moment, we are still in a process. Some legal framework is put in place, but not yet in that stage. But I think that, as you mentioned, there is a potential for this.
There's a potential, and I think there's both a business interest in the States to have that happen and a big strategic political interest in Washington to have the market here ready to really sell the gas should the market buy it.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks to Christina, and I am proceeding with our speakers, list of speakers, and last but not least, Māris Anģāns, research fellow at Latvian Institute of International Affairs. Is there interest in transportation business? Is there a potential in transportation business? Māris, please, floor is yours.
Thank you, Andris. Quite a challenging chapter that I have to write on transportation, and quite a challenging position to speak as the last one, because as you know, if you speak the last one, usually almost everything is said already, so nobody listens, and people think of wine and coffee that will follow afterwards. But
Māris, I promise I listen carefully.
Okay, it's enough with my boss, so I will proceed. Of course, transportation sector is such, both in Latvia and in the relationship with the United States of America. It's quite significant here in Latvia, but at the same time also quite problematic. Transportation sector, it constitutes something around 1/10 part of the Latvian GDP, 10.1% according to statistics. It's transport plus storage. Of course, not everything is transit. But when we come to transit, it's so heavily dependent on Russia and CIS that it's hard to imagine something that could depend more on Russia. So this is one of the last problematic sectors. And I think, as Christine already outlined, that in the energy sector we are leaving this dependence. Then in transportation sector we are quite far away. Because in the Riga port, if I'm not wrong, some 80%, 80, constitute cargo from the CIS, Russia, other countries, and over the railroads, as far as I know, the situation is quite similar. And some 2/3 of the transportation by railroads, it's related to Russia. And also the sector is quite significant, as it constitutes some 9% of the workplaces in Latvia. If we look at the risks, of course, it's the single source or cargo related to this single source, namely Russia, which is quite dependent on political decisions. We remember 2007, April, the bronze soldier in Tallinn, what happened afterwards, and we can never know what will happen to Latvia at some certain point. And of course, another point is concentration on low value-added products, such as coal, which constitutes something like 1/4 of the cargo transported through the Latvian ports. And it's not clear how far, how long we can continue with this quite a risky path. And then when we come to the US involvement in this sector, it's even more challenging in the way that almost everything is related to defense and military sector. So first of all, I will name, of course, the military exercises before the occupation of Crimea and Russia's aggression against Ukraine in general. These were exercises at smaller extent. Now, of course, we see more and more exercises here in the region, and the transportation sector is playing its part there. And the second thing was the NDN, what Andris Pildegovičs mentioned earlier, the Northern Distribution Network, which was one of the most significant projects, cooperation projects between Latvia and the United States. So what was the NDN? It was a link, not a link, but a set of transportation corridors that brought the American and other allies' cargo from the west, through Latvia, through Russia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan to Afghanistan. And it was something that in many ways assisted, of course, their submission in Afghanistan, because when the Pakistan sudden locks, they closed, then this was the best route how to bring the cargo to Afghanistan. If you look at the statistics, as of course it's not huge. It was something like 100,000 containers were celebrated in Riga port in June 2013. It was not only the cargo that came through Latvia, but also through other countries. Through Latvia, we have something like 93,000 TEUs transported, which is not much, but still not a bad number. And what is important to note is that something like 76% of it was transported over railroads. So railroad played quite significant part here. And I have here also to sign under what, again, Mr. Pildegovičs said, that the Latvian railroads here proved that they are quite competent, even though there is quite an anti-Western let's say, attitude inside the company, but I think its situation is changing. But nevertheless, it demonstrated that it can be a good partner for the United States here. And another factor that has to be mentioned about this cargo that was often called NATO cargo. it reflected also the other spheres, because usually when we say NATO, in fact we think the United States, because 97% of the cargo was the US cargo, and only the rest was the rest, mainly the European cargo. I see I have only 1 minute, and in that 1 minute I will try to focus on the future, not in the past. But the legacy of the NDN, of course, one was the financial factor, which was quite important for some companies, but not for the transportation sector in general. For example, for the Riga International Airport, at some certain points, it constituted 2/3 of all cargo. And this factor, I think it should be considered as the springboard for the Latvian transportation sector for the future, because I know that the Riga International Airport is going around China and trying to attract the cargo from China. And they can show that we have the capabilities to serve 747s. And then many people who go through the Riga International Airport, they have noticed that there are these big jumbos that are transporting the cargo. If there was none, it was much, much harder to speak about something like such in the future. And then about the non-financial value, which was, of course, much more important. At the time when Latvia paid almost no attention to defense, it was under 1%, which is absolutely miserable, to be honest. Then this was, the NDN was almost the only point that you could raise up in NATO. That was what Latvia was famous in NATO at that time. And of course, we got quite a good future, let's say, coverage in media, and it played quite a role for Latvia and for transportation sector future. And then what next for the transportation and transit sector? Of course, we have to diversify the sources of cargo. It's very easy to say, but not easy, of course, to do that. I see that I have 0 minutes left, and but one more, please. And of course, one of the directions that we have to work is China. And here, in fact, is something that China, where the United States could come in. China has the initiative One Belt, One Road, 16+1. And this could be something where Latvia and the United States could cooperate to circumvent Russia in a way, to establish, better embed the south-north corridor from Black Sea to Baltic Sea, and to assist Ukrainians, Georgians to circumvent Russia. That would be one factor. And the other is, of course, about the military sector, because the railroad will play a more important role now as an instrumental part of the defense architecture. So it should also maybe use more opportunity, this, for example, building more platforms to transport the heavy Abrams tanks, and maybe try to assist also other neighbors in Lithuania and Estonia, and we have to think maybe about the military logistics center. And last but not least, I would conclude with my primary, let's say, focus, which is security, as we have some members of the parliament here, 2% of GDP to defense next year, not 2018. This is what we hear around the United States. Why should they defend us if we are not able to defend ourselves? Thank you. I stop here.
Mari, thank you. But I think you should add the 2% next year and also funding for the institute. It would be very good. So in combination. Anyhow, thanks again for putting the transportation business in a wider security and regional transportation context, because exactly I think it's not just about bilateral relationship, it is about sort of using those transcontinental corridors and connecting them and interconnecting, trying to be part of this. This is sort of the future of Latvian transportation domain. We have 3 minutes for one round of questions and comments, so let's be very short and very quick. Arturs, please. It would be surprised if Arturs would not ask a question in a conference, so please. Which is a compliment to Arturs, of course. Please.
Thank you. Arturs Bikovs, Riga University student. And my question concerns what already mentioned by Mr. Rostovskis and Mr. Pildegovičs, and that's it, TTIP. So could anyone please, in a nutshell, describe what are the cons and pros of this agreement? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Atis, and then over Mirsu. Please, Atis.
Mr. Anjans did mention one hugely important strategic transportation system that we are developing, Baltic Rail. It's amazing. This is a huge change in not only for the Baltic states, but also for Europe, because it connects Europe with the Baltic states and even up to Finland. And another thing is, yeah, 2% next year, go ahead, find the money. Take it away from the teachers, take it away from the health, and have society simply collapse. In addition, if you pay too much money to the military, you know that half will be wasted. So we have devised a method of step by step, and in 3 years, increasing by 100% defense and not having it wasted.
Okay, thank you. I saw a question there and a question in the back. Yes, please. And I think then we more or less, unless there are urgent, yes, 2 questions, unless there are urgent ones. Yeah, please.
Hello, my name is Mircea Raiko, I'm intern at LIA. As I see, the United States has a quite regional or Baltic approach when it comes to the Baltic states in terms of defense, energy, and so on. What is happening on the other side? Are the Baltic states cooperating or competing in winning the hearts and minds of the United States?
Okay,
yeah,
thank you. Yes. It's also just I didn't see you before, so I didn't. Oh, excellent! So there's gentleman gestures, please.
Sounds perfectly. So my name is Vismans Meņuks. I'm more from entrepreneurial side. I'm running also businesses, and I have only 30 seconds to give some kind of question or remark. Then I'll give a little tip for Mr. Pildegovičs. As Martin Bonder said, we need investments to make we need import to make export, but there is a lack of ways to get investments from the US. So it means if we can get this investment from US, then we are making some strategical partners, and we can get also inside this American market. Because right now I can draw you a lot of schemes how in Latvia there is a lot of Russian money coming from European countries, from European companies as investors, but the beneficiaries are Russians or Eastern Europeans, but not Americans. Because America is more interesting than market in Belarus.
Okay, thank you. Please, and the last question, unless I overlooked someone else. If not, then the last question, please.
Hi, I'm David Barry. One thing, having served in the British military, there is a reluctance to put their lives on the line for the Latvians when you won't fund things. I'll make an observation. LIA are doing an investment event at the Radisson Blu, I think. I don't know how much that's going to cost. But you now have rural export clubs happening at no cost, no EU funds, in 4 places. What's more cost effective? Radisson Blu or local stars in Latvia giving their advice to entrepreneurs?
Thank you. And let's have a reverse order, starting with other side of the table, and we come back to this part of the table. Maris, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrejs. Almost caught me by surprise, but nevertheless will respond. And Rail Baltica, of course, very important issue, but unfortunately there is no funding from the United States and hard to expect something from it. But I would rather see the role of the United States in Ukraine, Georgia, trying to, let's say, increase the capacity of the container train Zubr and this link. So I'm not sure that the Americans can do much with the Rail Baltica, but nevertheless it would be, of course, anyway, very important to push for it. So what regards the 2%, Estonians can do it. We can't. And yes, finally and hopefully. And also traveled to the United States, Washington, D.C. We were also in one panel with Leo. And then there were quite many critical voices about why should somebody come to assist somebody that doesn't assist itself. And I suggested one thing, that when Latvian delegations go to the United States, they should go to the Korean War Memorial and read that freedom is not for free. And also another quote from the memorial that about the Korean War, that the American men and women, they came to defend the people and country they have never been before. And when something would happen here, then the Americans might ask the same question, and if there are some changes in the leadership, so I'm very afraid of what could happen. But back to the transportation sector, and here I finish, indeed, is that we have to use the NDN as the springboard, as I mentioned, and we have to try to use still this opportunity while some, let's say, things are still alive. Soon it will be forgotten, and then it will be no more springboard to use.
Okay, thank you, Maris. Christine?
Quickly on the subject of TTIP, this is something on my desk in Brussels on occasion. TTIP, it has the positive effects, and I'm sure I guess will explain more. Small and medium-sized enterprises will be able to get through regulatory hurdles to access American markets more easily. Cons, I think the term TTIP is something that sends terror in the hearts of many hearts and minds across the EU, in particular among the Green Party in Germany, people who are afraid of genetically modified organisms, or similarly about dispute settlement between companies. These are the cons, and they often have to do with culture and changing the norms and the understandings of how problems can be solved. I think there is not much conversation about really what the benefits could be, as long as you can overcome some of these more emotional reactions to cultural norms on both sides.
Thank you, Christine. Excellent. Andris, please.
Very briefly, my vision about Latvia is Latvia as a global educational center. It's like a brand. Then interconnect two railways, Rail Baltic and One Road, One Belt, and create kind of free economic zone, something like this. And then I hope one day this artificial European found monies will stop. Thank you.
I guess, yes, please, Michael.
Yes, I will shortly try to respond to all questions. Maris, you are lucky, you are a researcher, so your suggestion of having 2% next year of GDP to defense is not commented that you are populist. If I would do this, I would definitely get this kind of label, so lucky you. About TTIP, basically it's streamlining frameworks. Streamlining business frameworks on both sides of Atlantic, and if you do streamline business frameworks, it means that it's easier to do business. It's basically it will be the biggest world's market with one single framework. Maybe a little over-exaggerated, but pretty much so. Hearts and minds. If you ask New Yorkers, Kristaps Bērziņš, they say, great, Latvia. If you ask Bostonians about Andris Nelsons, great, Latvia. If you ask people on West Coast about Kristaps Zariņš, surgeon, and many of people know him, they say, great, Latvia. So people think about us, how good we are or how bad. We have great Latvians in the US, we have great friends, so we are winning hearts and minds. And your question of efficiency and cost effectiveness, I will tell you a little bit in how to say from my previous history. There was a meeting of Madam President of Latvia, Vīķe Freiberga, with one US senator before we joined NATO. And she came in and he said, are you okay, Madam President? He said, yeah. She said, yes. And you, Mr. Senator? He said, also yes. So what can I do for you? Madam President said, we need your support of us getting into NATO. He said, you got it. Anything else? No. Meeting was over. We don't think in this country in these categories. Unfortunately. I hope one day we get a little Americanization in this kind of way of doing business. Thank you.
Thank you, Mārtiņš. I think it was a very good and thought-provoking conclusion from your side. It's even difficult to add something. Just very short remarks on my side. The event was called Building Bridges in many domains. And then I was reminded recently by one of Russian colleagues, there was a discussion between Nixon and Brezhnev. And Nixon said, let's build the bridge. And Brezhnev asked, we'll be building the bridge across the river or along the river? So, of course, there are different ways of building those bridges, and the devil is in details in many ways. But I think I should underline that at least some part of the process, some part of the building bridges starts at home, and I think we indicated it here on many accounts, be it a business mentality, be it initiative, be it a 2%, be it societal resilience, be it open energy markets. So I think these many elements actually start at home. And then we can be I would not say immediately equal partner, but much more appealing partner also to our partners in the world and also to the United States. But of course, for additional thoughts, please have a book as well and see and look for the details. I must say a lot of thanks to our partners. Some of them already disappeared, I can see, but the most important part was done. The most important contribution was here. Certainly to the authors, because it would be empty book without great contributions, intellectual contributions of authors. I must say thanks to the readers. Valdis Zatlers is the first president, the first reader, excellent, to the participants. But Martiņš wants to go away, that's why I want additionally say thanks to the speakers, to distinguished speakers for joining us and also enlightening us today. So thank you. And now there is a coffee break or coffee end. Please. Thank you.